I clearly remember the first time I heard about the most mysterious day in Jesus' life. I grew up hearing that his greatest sacrifice was dying on the cross for all humanity. But there was something else, something hidden, something that was never seen by human eyes. Have you ever wondered what happened immediately after the death of Jesus Christ? I'm not referring to the resurrection, but rather to something more obscure and mysterious, something that defies everything we thought we knew about him. Close your eyes and imagine this with me. At the exact moment Christ breathed his last breath, an invisible curtain was torn between two worlds. No one on earth could witness it, but at that instant, Jesus began a profound spiritual journey to a place that many fear even to mention, the world of the dead. But why exactly did he need to go there? What did that moment signify? This seemingly simple question carries profound mysteries that involve the essence of good, evil, and human existence. Jesus didn't go down there to suffer more. That had already happened on the cross. On the contrary, he set out on a specific and crucial mission, going as a conqueror, a proclaimer of victories. Imagine the spiritual world paralyzed by absolute silence as the Son of God entered the deepest shadows to proclaim something that would change everything forever. To understand this journey, you must first clearly imagine the scene of his last breath. A dark sky, the earth shaking, the temple veil tearing violently in two. These phenomena were not coincidences or natural accidents, they were cosmic signs that something monumental was happening beyond our comprehension. Immediately after his death, while everyone mourned around the cross, Jesus crossed a dimension unknown to us, where eternity meets time and where souls awaited an uncertain fate. This place, mentioned in the Bible as Sheol or Hades, was not simply the fiery hell popularly imagined. It was a complex spiritual realm filled with souls awaiting final judgment. There, Christ did not face additional torments. On the contrary, he came as a conqueror. His presence, full of authority and power, deeply shook the spiritual structures that had been firmly established until then. Can you imagine that? A divine conqueror in enemy territory, not to fight, but to proclaim his ultimate victory over evil and death. This part of the story is not only fascinating, but it has profound implications for how we understand our own spiritual destiny. By entering the world of the dead, Jesus made it clear that his victory was not restricted to earth alone. Death, fear and hopelessness, all the things that had dominated souls since the fall of humanity, were shaken in their own home. Imagine the spiritual reaction of this dark realm to the one who had the power to liberate souls from eternal captivity. The spirits of those who died with hope gazed in reverence, while those who lived far from righteousness finally understood the magnitude of the error of their rejection. The power of Christ's victory echoed through eternity, transforming a place of despair into a territory marked by divine sovereignty. But what exactly did he proclaim in that place? How does that affect you and me today? These questions are not just theological speculations, but central questions about our existence and about what life, death, and hope really mean. This hidden journey of Jesus reveals an unknown dimension of faith and sacrifice, a dimension where death is not the end, but the beginning of something extraordinary. Are you ready to understand this incredible revelation more deeply and discover what it really means for you? If you believe you've heard everything about Jesus Christ, prepare to completely change your perspective. Death was only the beginning of something much bigger, something that forever altered the destiny of humanity. But after all, what was the message proclaimed by Jesus in the darkest domains? The crucial moment of this spiritual journey was precisely the proclamation of absolute victory. Christ did not enter the darkness to offer a second chance or to negotiate with evil forces. His message was direct and powerful. The reign of death was over. The power that sin exercised over humanity no longer had authority. Jesus' proclamation was, above all, a declaration of definitive freedom for those who were spiritually imprisoned and an irrevocable sentence for the forces of evil. This spiritual victory also has powerful implications in the present. It means that all of us, today, can live free from the fear of the unknown, of death, and of evil itself. Jesus' journey gives us a new perspective on how we approach our own daily spiritual battles. It offers us the assurance that we are not fighting alone. Imagine the spiritual and emotional strength of living, knowing that the ultimate enemy of humanity has already been defeated. What difference would it make in your daily life if you fully understood that spiritual victory has already been won, and that you don't need to live trapped by fear or insecurity about your eternal future? This event, therefore, is not just a distant biblical episode, but an invitation to rethink our existence, our purpose, and above all, our spirituality. By understanding what really happened after the cross, we discover a transforming power available now to each of us. Are you ready to embrace this victory and allow it to transform your life today? When I was a child, I always heard stories about heaven and hell, about rewards and punishments. I confess that for a long time, I imagined hell as a place governed by an evil being sitting on a flaming throne, surrounded by suffering and anguish. But as I grew up, I realized that the spiritual reality described in the Bible is quite different from what I imagined. What really happened when Jesus entered the realm of the dead after his crucifixion is fascinating, much deeper than any childish fantasy could create. Have you ever imagined a warrior entering enemy territory after winning the main battle, not to fight again, but to declare to his defeated adversaries that the victory is consummated and irreversible? That's exactly what Jesus did in the spiritual world after his death. He didn't enter the darkness to suffer more or to negotiate with the defeated. He entered as king, victorious and unquestionable. You must be wondering, why is this important today? Because this moment isn't just a historical or religious curiosity. It's an eternal declaration that everything we fear most, pain, death, suffering, has already lost its definitive power. We live in a world in constant anguish in the face of suffering and death. In 2023, for example, a global survey revealed that more than 60% of people claim to have anxiety related to the fear of death or the unknown. This fear, which traps so many people in a psychological prison, has already been defeated more than 2,000 years ago. When Jesus entered the domain of death, he clearly proclaimed, "Fear no longer needs to dominate you." But what does this mean concretely for you and for me today? It means freedom. Freedom from fear, spiritual and emotional freedom. It means that we can face each daily challenge knowing that the main battle has already been won in our favor. When Christ entered hell, he personally confronted evil at its deepest root. He didn't go to be a victim or a prisoner. He went to demonstrate in a definitive way his authority over the spiritual world. Think about it. Hell, the greatest representation of hopelessness, did not resist his presence. He completely changed the meaning of that place. In that extraordinary moment, while everyone thought that darkness had won, Christ declared the beginning of a new spiritual reality. The victory he announced was not only about physical death, but about everything that prevents us from living fully: shame, failure, despair. Maybe you've never thought like that before. Maybe you've always imagined this event only as an obscure or distant passage. But what happened at that moment can completely change your perspective on life and death. Jesus became the absolute Lord over everything you fear. Now think with me for a moment. What difference would it make in your life today to know that everything you fear most has already been defeated? How would that change your way of facing each day, each challenge, each fear? Christ didn't come to offer just salvation after death. He came to bring freedom right now. When we understand this truth deeply, we begin to live with confidence, with courage. Not because we are strong on our own, but because he has already conquered everything that could destroy us. So, I invite you today to see death and hell not as symbols of fear, but as territories conquered by the greatest declaration of hope ever made. The story does not end with suffering and defeat, but with an absolute triumph. The question now is simple, but decisive. Are you willing to fully live the freedom conquered by him? The spiritual journey that Jesus made to hell is not just a distant episode, something lost in history or in religious imagination. It is, above all, a personal and urgent invitation, an invitation to you, exactly where you are now, to experience a profound spiritual transformation. When we understand what really happened at that moment after the crucifixion, we discover a powerful key to our own existence. It's not just about believing in something that happened 2,000 years ago, but about recognizing a timeless truth that resonates strongly in our current reality. Fear dominates much of our daily life. Recently, the World Health Organization highlighted that more than 300 million people worldwide suffer from anxiety-related disorders. Much of this comes from spiritual insecurity about the future or the afterlife. Now imagine for a moment that all this anxiety, this existential fear, could be replaced by a deep confidence, by the certainty that death, pain, and anguish have already been overcome by someone stronger than ourselves. Do you see how liberating that is? How can that give us the strength to face our daily challenges, whatever they may be? By declaring his victory over the spiritual forces of death, Christ not only defeated darkness, he gave us the authority to face all the shadows in our own lives. The truth is that this victory is available now, not in the distant future, but here and now. The spiritual battle has already been won. The enemy, who previously seemed invincible, is defeated. But in order for this reality to make a difference in your life, you need to decide to embrace it. By accepting this truth, you stop living dominated by doubt or fear, and you start living with courage, purpose, and spiritual clarity. You begin to be part of this eternal victory, not only as a distant spectator, but as an active participant in a greater story where good has already prevailed over evil. Today, I challenge you to reflect deeply on this journey, not only as a historical or religious event, but as a personal turning point. Christ descended into hell not only to show his power, but to directly offer you a life freed from the chains of fear and uncertainty. The decision is yours now. Will you accept this freedom and start living a new story from today? Have you ever caught yourself thinking about what it would be like to face head-on what scares you the most? I clearly remember one night when I woke up frightened after dreaming about what might exist after death. This fear of the unknown has always fascinated me, and I imagine that maybe you have felt something similar. But what if I told you that Jesus, after death, faced not only physical death, but also the darkest and most obscure forces that have ever existed? The exact moment when Christ descended into hell was not a chapter of additional suffering, but something quite different. Imagine yourself entering a territory dominated by a fierce enemy where no one had ever dared to enter before. Not out of fear, but because no one had the power necessary to challenge that spiritual reality until that moment. And then someone emerges with such authority, such conviction, that he simply breaks through the barriers that seemed impassable. That's exactly how Jesus entered the realm of the dead after his crucifixion. He didn't arrive as a hostage or prisoner. He entered as a victorious general, announcing the end of an era of fear and spiritual oppression. He proclaimed clearly with divine authority that death would no longer have power over those who believe in his victory. However, don't think that this proclamation was made in silence or without resistance. After all, for thousands of years, dark spiritual forces have kept humanity trapped in existential anguish. In our days, this feeling still persists visibly. In a recent survey conducted in 2024, 45% of people said they live in constant worry about what happens after death. The fear of the unknown still dominates hearts and minds around the world. However, it is precisely against this deep fear that Christ's proclamation rises. The victory he announced in that obscure place is not something reserved only for ancient times. It's not just an abstract religious concept. It's a living, present, and real victory for us today who face inner battles every day. Imagine with me, if Christ directly faced the essence of the deepest spiritual fear, what will be the limit of what you can also face in your daily life? How many difficult situations, emotional and spiritual challenges do you face thinking that you need to face them alone? How many times do you forget that that same spiritual victory has already been declared also in your favor? The spiritual reality that Jesus revealed in that descent into the world of the dead is the basis for something much more powerful than just emotional solace. It's a radical change in how we perceive our own life, pain, and even death. When we fully understand this truth, we discover an inner strength capable of sustaining us even in the darkest and most difficult moments. You see, I'm not just talking about future comfort after death. I'm talking about today, about now. When you wake up tomorrow, you will be able to do so knowing that your spiritual battles, your anxieties, your deepest fears have already been won. You are not alone in these battles. You never have been. What Christ did in the spiritual realms of death was to pave the way for you to live fully today. He brought hope exactly where it seemed impossible to have hope. He brought liberation where there was previously spiritual slavery. It's as if a chain that previously seemed eternal had been shattered, not by human force, but by a greater authority. This spiritual victory is an open invitation to all of us, and it is up to each one to decide whether to accept it or not. Today I ask you directly, now knowing this absolute spiritual victory, what will be your response? How will you live tomorrow? Knowing that fear no longer needs to govern your life? Now more than ever, it is time to embrace this transformative spiritual reality, because the victory over death and evil was not only proclaimed 2,000 years ago, it echoes to this day, ready to completely transform your life. Are you ready for that change? When I first understood the real magnitude of what Christ had achieved on that spiritual journey, something radically changed within me. Fear ceased to be the commander of my life. Insecurity about the future gave way to a deep certainty and a peace that I had never experienced before. And it is exactly this peace, this unwavering certainty, that I want to share with you now. Jesus' victory over spiritual darkness is not just an inspiring narrative. It is something that can completely redefine your existence. We live in a time when it seems that every news is capable of discouraging us. Pandemics, wars, economic and environmental crises, and emotional instability reaching historical records. According to recent data from the UN, more than 1 billion people in the world live under constant emotional stress caused by these external factors. In this scenario, an absolute spiritual victory, which guarantees us peace even in the midst of the most intense storms, is more necessary than ever. Jesus Christ has already defeated the enemy most feared by humanity. He has already broken through the deepest spiritual barriers, ensuring that you no longer need to live in constant fear of tomorrow. From today on, the choice is yours. You can remain trapped in the invisible currents of fear, or you can definitively embrace the spiritual freedom that Christ conquered for you. This freedom is real, it is available, and it only depends on you to accept it. Today, do you choose to remain in the shadow of fear, or take the first step towards the absolute freedom that Christ conquered. I have always found it fascinating how a story that happened more than 2,000 years ago can still be so relevant today. If you stop to think, the journey that Christ made by descending into the world of the dead was not just a distant spiritual event. It was an event that completely redefined the way we can understand our own lives, our daily challenges, and our connection with something much greater than ourselves. But how exactly does this spiritual victory of Christ influence our life here? And now, in the 21st century, how can something that occurred in a place unknown to human eyes transform our daily reality, our everyday fears, and the anxieties we feel in the face of the uncertain future? Allow me to tell you something intriguing. Recently, a global study revealed that almost 70% of people claim to feel some degree of insecurity about what happens after death. And it is precisely in this insecurity, in this deep doubt about the unknown, that the message of Christ's victory gains its greatest significance. Because, in descending to the spiritual domain of death, Jesus was not only confronting a spiritual reality, he was completely redefining our understanding of what it is to live, to die, and to exist eternally. But after all, why do we need to clearly understand what Jesus did in this spiritual territory? Because it frees us now, not only after death. When Christ proclaimed his victory in hell, he was declaring the end of the spiritual domination of fear over us. He announced that physical death is not the end of our story, but only a transition. Have you ever thought about how you would live your life if you had the absolute certainty that there is no real reason to fear death or the future? Imagine waking up every morning with the confidence that absolutely nothing can threaten your eternity. Imagine the emotional and spiritual freedom of knowing that the most difficult battle has already been won in your favor. It is important to clarify that Christ did not descend into hell to negotiate peace with the forces of evil, nor even to offer a second chance to those who rejected God. He went to proclaim an absolute and unquestionable victory, offering an open path to those who chose to follow him. The decision remains ours, and we need to understand this clearly. In a world where wars, conflicts, and natural disasters seem to dominate the headlines, the idea of Jesus' spiritual victory brings a new perspective. Today, we face economic crises, devastating wars, global pandemics, and the ever-present threat of nuclear conflicts. What does this have to do with Christ's victory over death and hell? Everything. Because the root of our fear, whatever it may be, is the fear of the unknown, of loss and of death. And imagine if you could live in the midst of these challenges with an unwavering conviction that whatever happens, your spiritual victory is guaranteed. That certainty changes everything. It changes our way of reacting in the face of difficulties, losses, and even pain. This is true freedom. What if the victory of Jesus can completely transform how you face your life right now? Not just in your spirituality or personal faith, but in your daily decisions, in your relationships, in the way you face crises and difficulties. Think about it. Spiritual victory is already guaranteed. It is only up to you to decide whether to live it or continue to be trapped in fear and insecurity. Before continuing, I want to ask a direct and fundamental question. If you really understood the magnitude of the spiritual freedom conquered by Christ on that mysterious day, what would your life be like from now on? Would it be different, less anxious, more courageous, with more purpose? If that question sparked something inside you, then it is exactly the moment to dive even deeper into the understanding of this victory. The invitation is open. What will you decide to do next? When I understood that Christ's descent into hell was, in fact, a powerful victory proclaimed directly against everything that could imprison me, I realized that my life could never be the same again. It was no longer possible to live under the shadow of fear or uncertainty. The way was open to a new way of living, not just surviving. Today, I want you to feel exactly that, to understand the magnitude of what it really means to be free. Because Christ's victory guarantees us that we are not destined for fear, but for purpose, security, and courage in the face of any adversity. This transformation is real. It is palpable. It is not just an abstract belief, but a real, accessible, and transformative power. Understanding this can change everything, from your relationships to the way you react to current global crises. Now reflect with me. Will you continue to live as if this victory had never happened? Or will you finally allow this real freedom to completely transform your existence? The decision is yours. And that decision can redefine everything. Have you ever noticed how we are all constantly seeking answers? We all want to better understand life, what happens after death, or what the true meaning of our existence is. Throughout this journey together, we realize that the moment when Christ descended into hell is not just an ancient narrative. It's something extremely current, something capable of directly answering the biggest questions we face today. We live in a time marked by profound uncertainties, global pandemics, international conflicts, environmental and social crises that challenge our hope and generate anxiety at levels never seen before. Recent studies indicate that more than half of the world's population claims to feel some type of existential insecurity, a void that no material conquest or personal success seems to fill completely. What if the definitive answer to these challenges lay precisely in this spiritual event, in this forgotten or misunderstood moment of history? When we understand the depth of what occurred that day, we begin to see clearly that the spiritual victory proclaimed by Christ is not something reserved only for the past or a distant future. It is an invitation for the present, an invitation for you and me to live without fear, free from the weight of the uncertainties that haunt us daily. Imagine right now how your life could be different if you decided to fully accept this truth. It's not just about religious beliefs, but a real, tangible change that can influence every aspect of your life. Your way of dealing with losses, financial crises, global anxiety about pandemics or wars, all of this gains a new perspective when you understand that your greatest battle has already been won. But maybe you are wondering how to apply this in practice, how to transform this knowledge into a daily reality, concrete and meaningful. That's an excellent question, perhaps the most important of all. The truth is that you can start right now. The key is to recognize that you no longer need to fight alone, that you do not need to carry alone the weight of uncertainties or fears. Christ, when he descended into the world of the dead, proclaimed something powerful that echoes to this day. He is greater than any challenge you face now. The decision you need to make is simple, but transformative. Accept or not to live daily in this liberating reality. You know what's amazing about all this? You already have the answer you need. The spiritual victory proclaimed is not just a distant promise, it's a present and accessible reality. It invites you to step out of the position of passive spectator, to take on an active role in a spiritual story that transforms lives every day. Now, looking at all this, I ask you directly, how would your life be tomorrow if you fully embraced this victory? What would your decisions, your relationships, your way of dealing with anxiety and global challenges be like? You have the opportunity, exactly now, to experience a true freedom, capable of transforming every moment of your life. This freedom is not an empty or abstract promise. It's a concrete certainty that you are not alone. You never have been. Christ faced the deepest shadows precisely so that you wouldn't have to do it alone. The victory is already yours. Do not let a truth capable of completely transforming your existence go unnoticed. I want to end this conversation by making a special invitation. Allow this spiritual victory over death, fear, and uncertainty to be more than an old story. Allow it to be the reality that you live today, because when you truly understand this, you will never be the same. Are you ready to take that decisive step and live without fear, without insecurity, fully connected to the purpose for which you were born? The journey we have made so far has been profound and revealing. Now it is clear that fully understanding what happened in that spiritual descent is not a mere religious or historical matter, but a vital issue for how you choose to live today. And that choice can define much more than your spiritual life. It defines how you will face all future challenges. We live in an era full of uncertainties: economic, social, environmental, and even existential. But the message that Christ proclaimed in descending into hell echoes strongly as an answer to our deepest doubts. You don't need to live trapped by any fear or anguish. You don't need to be dominated by anxiety, insecurity, or the feeling that you are alone in the face of global challenges. That's the beauty of the spiritual victory proclaimed by Jesus. It's not an empty promise or a superficial consolation, but a real, powerful, and transformative certainty. You are invited to be a part of this right now. Finally, thank you for sharing this journey with me. My hope is that everything you have heard today is not just information or knowledge, but something that deeply transforms your way of living, that brings you hope and courage in the face of any challenge that life presents. Now the decision is yours. Accept this spiritual freedom and allow your life to be truly transformed. And are you ready to live a new story from today? If you liked our theme, subscribe to the channel, leave your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to like the video.